This is Robert Schwinker here with Dan Kimerling, and we are going to build upon the discussion that we started around the community in 2014, discussing financial APIs. The nature of this discussion will be around the DNA of financial technologies. Dan, please give us your overview.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I think the key thing about building financial APIs is that it's not like building an API for cloud computing. There's some similarities, but what it really is all about is about creating a powerful set of tools that are easy for developers to use, and creating so that's one aspect. The second thing is working with the legacy financial institutions to actually be able to bring it to market. And the third is being able to create something that developers actually want, because you don't want to build it. You don't want to be in the situation of assuming that if you build it, they will come.
In this roundtable discussion that we'll have, what are the kinds of questions do you think both financial institutions and developers will be asking us and discussing?
So I think there's a question around how do you create shared trust through policies, practices, and technology between the financial institutions, which will need to open themselves up to developers, and developers that then take the newly available technologies and tools and integrate them into applications. So I think that's a real question. And then I think there's a question around, what is the business model? Because banks need to understand that the business models that they use through retail distribution are not going to work through developer-led distribution.
Terrific. See you all South by Southwest 2015.
So they have if you build it, they will come.
What is this about?
FinTech API DNA. That was one of the suggestions you had. And I think there are three really critical things that people fuck up. They really fuck up the distribution. So it's if you build it, they will come. Then there's they don't understand the complexity of financial products and information. And they don't understand the underlying complexity of the legacy infrastructure, which are three very important aspects of writing a good FinTech API.
After it's built it, and when you want to get people to come, what does it take to get developers to come develop on a FinTech API?
So I think there are a couple things. The most important thing is that you give them access to something that they want. You either give them access to critical information, you give them access to payments, right? You create an ability for them to do something which either they couldn't do before programmatically, or that the amount of time, energy, cost, etc. was so high that they chose not to do it. A good example, if you want to integrate with the ACH ecosystem today, it's not a 3-month long process. But if you want to integrate with an ACH API that we build, for example, it's about 10 minutes.
Wow, so that's very interesting. What are the questions that our large financial institutions are asking around architecting APIs for their back-end payment systems?
So I think there are a couple things. They always ask about the normal AML, KYC, anti-money laundering, and know your customer requirements that all financial institutions are required to comply to, by the feds. They always ask about risk management, making sure that the right people are able to use the API, and that no one who shouldn't use the API is allowed to. That's very important. I think the other thing is, some of these institutions have 50+ years of infrastructure and training on legacy systems. So then the question is, how do we not throw the baby out with the bathwater? How do we take what they have and transform it into something modern, or relatively modern, or modern feeling, instead of just, banks will never throw it out. So you just have to understand that constraint and adapt to it.
What are the questions that startups are asking around integrating with bank FinTech?
Yeah, so when is it available? Because they really want it, right? It's Every week we get, we get tens or maybe hundreds of emails about like, when are you going to be available? So I think that's one thing. I think a second thing that we often find is that banks or that developers, they don't want to understand the complexity. Right? They don't want to care about the difference between ACH wires, book transfers, IAT SWIFT, Forex, VCNs, merchant acquiring, merchant card issuance, and I'm just getting started. Right, there's like a long list. They don't want to understand the complexity. They want the system to understand the complexity, and be able to deal with the complexity in an intelligent way. They want it to be quote unquote abstracted away, so that it's a relatively easy experience from a developer perspective. The flip side is they want something powerful. So I think that's why the design of the system is so important. Without good system design, you either oversimplify and yield a tool that's not very powerful, or you leave a tool that's so powerful that no one can understand how to use it. That's like why it's not a science but a real art.